the process for the 2023 plan of work. We talked a little bit about that in the June webinar. And so, Joy, I know you're multitasking a little bit. Do you mind advancing the slides for me? Thank you. And then we'll also talk about the critical issues management piece as well. So I'm going to try to get through both pieces of this because I really want to make sure you all have the information. And then at the end, I'll definitely open it up for questions. We'll try to do the hands first because, again, if it's in the chat, folks can't see that necessarily when they watch these later. And also for the interpreter, it'll be important that we are able to verbally go through the questions. So bear with me, and I'll try to go through this so that we have plenty of time for questions. So next slide, please. So in the past, for 2020 and all the way through 2022, the plan of work was collected in the institutional profile. And so as we try to transition away from report and the portal, we're building the plan of work module in NRS. Not quite done yet. And we didn't want to have a delay with the Q1 capacity funds. And so what we're doing for the 2023 plan of work is we're asking you all to submit it outside of the system with a CSV template, which is basically like an Excel sheet. And that'll go to the NRS help desk. So nrs@usda.gov. Just want to note that if you report jointly, you would submit a single submission. So the process that you went through in terms of institutional profile, collecting the information, putting it into that format. I know that this format is a little different, but that process, the joint reporting, all of that would be the same. So I just wanted to note that. Next slide, please. So we talked about this last time. Major change that you'll notice here, or not major, but the change you'll notice here is executive summary. Instead of 8,000 characters, we moved it up to 10,000. But these fields should be very familiar to you. They are the same fields that you would have seen in the institutional profile. You also saw these fields when completing the annual report of accomplishments. And so executive summary, peer review, stakeholder input. There's 4 different sections, but all related to stakeholder input. So how will you seek stakeholder input? How will you identify the stakeholders? How will you collect it? How will you consider it? So those are all, should be familiar. I see one person said they are unable to see the slides, but I can see them. Is anyone else having a problem seeing the slides? Okay. Jennifer, sorry about that. It looks like most folks can see them, but we will definitely send the slide deck out. And okay, looks like you're good, great. So if you don't mind, and advance, Joy, and actually if you could pull up the template, actually this would be a good time to show the actual template. Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Still can't see the ASL interpreter. We're having an issue with the video for some reason, so trying to troubleshoot that.
Alexis, can you confirm you can see the template?
I can see the template, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So this is very straightforward. It's 7 cells in 1 row. So the first one is actually a drop down where you will be able to select your state or your organization. And then the rest of the cells are exactly what we just saw in the table that was on the slide, the executive summary, the peer review, and then you have the 4 cells related to stakeholder input. So it's really just this 1 row with these 7 cells. A couple tips in terms of using this, when you go into the cell, you're just going to double click. That way you can either enter text or you can copy and paste text. And a nice little tip, if you're not familiar with it, because it can be frustrating, is if you want to go down a line inside the cell, you'll hit Alt plus Enter. Because if you just hit enter, it's going to pop you out of the cell. I have a few more tips just like that on the slides, but we'll get to that in just a second. And we sent out a recap from the last webinar with some FAQs, but I just wanted to take a pause here just to say that there were some questions on what our expectation is. What do we enter in here? Can we enter no significant updates? And this was in the response on those FAQs in the recap, but just want to reiterate here. So you can say no significant updates. Whatever you put in this template is what will eventually be uploaded into NRS. So for example, when you go to do your 2024 plan of work in NRS, if all you put was no significant update, that will be all you can see from 2023 and all that you have as a reference. So we would encourage you to put in here what is useful to you in terms of going forward as a reference. We're not going to require you to put in full text. I also want to add one more thing, which is when I looked at, the 2022 plans of work that were in institutional profile, I didn't look at all of them, but I'd say I looked at about 20 of them. I never saw where someone said no significant updates. So it would be somewhat unusual from what was done the past several years. You can put that. We don't want to have it be burdensome. We don't want to have it be repetitive, but we're not requiring you to retype everything. If a copy paste makes sense for your state or your institution, and you think that it can clearly represent what you plan to do for 2023, I think that's fine. But we're not requiring you to do a full copy paste. You can do that, and it would be probably useful for you to reference, like I said, when you complete the 24 plan of work. So Joy, if you don't mind going back to the PowerPoint, please, and advancing one more slide. So a couple more tips here. We talked already about how to get into the cell, how to move to a line in the cell. Formatting, like bolding, underlining, underlines, links, tables, bulleted lists, tab lists, which is just another type of list. It won't transfer over when the data is uploaded into the NRS database. So we're asking you to not include those things because if you do, it won't make its way into NRS. So visually, it's not going to transfer over. The other thing is when you save the file, you would just save it with that end of XLSX. So when you go to do a file save as, the option there will say Excel workbook.xlsx, and that'll be an option for you to save the file like that with that format. Font and font size doesn't necessarily matter, but those character counts that I referenced before, 10,000 for the executive summary and 8,000 for all the other fields, it does count spaces. So I've found that the easiest way to kind of count that is in Word, because you can just kind of highlight and have it do a count automatically for you. Next slide, please. So the process will be, we're asking you again to send the completed templates to nrs@usda.gov and use the subject line 2023 plan of work and then include your institution or state name. We're asking that, there was a question I think in the last webinar about how you'll be notified of approval or the status. So what we're asking is that you include all the POCs that would like to be notified when you send that through, specifically your directors. So that will be helpful because we would assume when you submit it that they have reviewed and approved that content. So including them in that communication will be very important. If you're reporting jointly, it would probably be helpful to have all the folks from each institution on that email chain as well, so that everybody gets notified at the same time. Because I'm jumping down a few bullets, but you'll see we're going to just reply all, so that we respond back to what you sent, we give you the comments from the national program leader, and that the communication goes out to everyone. So I'm backing up a few bullets, but once we receive those templates to the NRS email box, we'll validate the format. So really just looking for those things I mentioned before, making sure that there's no bold or underlines or tables that might cause a problem with the upload. And then once we take a look at that and it looks good, we'll get the information, the completed template, to the national program leader that's assigned to review your state's plan of work, and we'll get their comments. Once we get approval from them, we'll provide the comments and the approval or the status back to that email chain. So we'll reply all and provide that information to give you confirmation of that final status. And then we'll notify the awards management division to make sure that the Q1 funds will be released. And then eventually, a couple months after that, those templates will be uploaded to the NRS database so that, again, it'll be there as a reference when the 2024 plan of work is completed in the system. Next slide, please. So we've already talked about executive summary and peer review and stakeholder input. So the other obvious major part of the plans of work is critical issues. So we already talked about how the executive summary and peer review and stakeholder input is done outside the system in this template. So the template will be completed, but the good news is that you can actually manage your critical issues in NRS. That functionality is being developed now and should be live in the next couple of weeks here, so early August. So you'll be able to complete the template and manage your critical issues at the same time. So next slide, please. So these might be a little hard to see, but basically you'll be able to get in to manage your critical issues from the plan of work tile. And that should look fairly familiar because it's similar to the view you had with the annual report where you'll see your state and you can click into your state or your institution. And then the view on the right there, the screenshot, is what you would see is basically a list of your critical issues. I want to point out before we advance that there's a button there on each one, or on that top one, I should say, that says update and one that says close out. Ran out of room on this slide a little bit, but at the very bottom of that page, you would also see an add new button. Can you advance, Joy? And I do see a hand, and I will get to you, Matt. I just want to wrap this up only because I want to make sure that all this information is out to you all. So I don't want to run out of time, but I promise there's not a ton more. So I will definitely open up to questions. So give me just a few more minutes here. So you'll be able to add new critical issues. So this is pretty straightforward. Like I said, at the bottom of that page of the listing of critical issues, you'll have a button to add new. And this is the screen that would pop up. So you would just put in your title, your description, the science emphasis areas would actually be labeled. This is just a mock-up, and then you would say if it's short, intermediate, or long-term, and you would save it. So just want to highlight here, because we're working on a few different years at a time. So the plan of work is for 2023. So if you create a new critical issue, it would be available to assign to projects and programs that are for 2023 forward. So what does that mean? It means that that start and end date of the project is the parameters the system's going to use to identify those. So I want to make sure that I note that. So this applies to projects and programs for 2023 forward, if you're adding a new critical issue. Next slide, please. So you can also update existing critical issues. So on that page with all of the critical issues listed, if you have a critical issue that's already live, it's already been assigned to projects and programs, you can choose to update from that critical issue card. Click the button that says update, and this is what would pop up. So you could edit the title, you could edit the description, you can edit the length and all these same fields and save it. If you make the change to an existing critical issue, it's going to immediately take effect on all those projects and programs that are already tagged to that critical issue. Because it already exists, you're editing it, but it's not new and you're not closing it out, you're just making an update to it. It's not going to change what was done in the 22 annual report, because again, this is for 2023. So again, it could get a little confusing with crossing over years, but I just wanted to clarify that point when you're talking about updating critical issues. It applies immediately and you would be able to use it. It would show as the updated critical issue information would show if you were going to assign it for new projects and programs. Next slide, please. You'll also be able to close out existing critical issues. So this is where you really want to take note. So again, this applies for 2023 forward. So if you choose to close it out, it's going to have a status that shows that says closing out in fiscal year 2023. When you're making, creating new projects or programs with those dates that fall in 23, that critical issue should not be an option for you. It will not be an option in the system because that critical issue is labeled as closing out, has the status of closing out. We would highly recommend that until the annual report for 2022 is complete, like the full annual report of accomplishments that we just got through for 21, don't reassign projects and programs. Yes, they will need to be reassigned, but the system will allow you to do that with the functionality that's being built. You'll have a view of all projects and programs that don't have a critical issue, including those that no longer have one because the one they had was closed out. So by waiting to get through the 22 annual report, everything will show up correctly in the annual report. And once it's there and it's final and it's approved, it's going to stay that way. But if you go through and start retagging things in advance, it's going to not do that. It's going to show up in the annual report based on what you've adjusted in the meanwhile. So there is a difference with each action. What happens if you add a new, what happens if you update an existing, and what happens if you close out an existing. So I've tried to capture that on these slides, but certainly reach out if you have questions that you think about after this, because this is new. And once it's live and you get in there and you start taking a look and trying to utilize it, if questions come up, you know where to find us. So please don't hesitate to reach out. The only other thing I want to flag for a smaller portion of the folks on the webinar today, we have 5 states that do not report jointly, and that's Arkansas, Ohio, West Virginia, Texas, and Maryland. If you all have questions about critical issues, please reach out to us in the help desk so that we can talk with you separately, because it's a much smaller group of folks who are affected, but you might have questions because of the way that you report, since it's not joint. So if you run into questions, you have questions, you would like to talk with us, please let us know. We're available. But I would ask that you do that separately offline, just because it doesn't apply to the majority of the people on the call today. So it might get a little bit confusing. Next slide, please. All right, so just a quick recap. We will get the template out to you. We also have guidance, which goes over a lot of the information that I just covered in the PowerPoint. Probably this week, says no later than August 1st, but I believe we should be able to get that out to you all this week. Early August, we will again expect the functionality for that critical issue management to be available in NRS, and that notification will go out via the listserv as usual when we have a release. The 2023 plan of work is due September 1st, and that'll be submitted to nrs@usda.gov. And by September 30th, the NIFA review will be complete. And again, a couple months down the road after September 30th, the data will be uploaded into NRS. And then for 2024 plan of work, we'll be doing all this in the system. So we won't have to do these extra steps outside, which will be nice. So I'm going to stop talking there and we'll go straight to questions to try to capture questions you all have. So I will ask Matt to go ahead. Matt Capella, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I apologize. I didn't mean to raise my hand then.
Okay, no problem. Anyone have questions? Let me look at the chat here. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Dr. Hargrave, I see your comment. If you don't mind sending me a message, I can check on that for you. You emailed twice. I'll try to follow up with you. I'm not sure that I saw that message, but I can definitely let you know. Okay, Oscar's asking, will we go back to 5-year rolling plan of work or will we continue yearly plan of work? So that's a good question, Oscar. We did put this in the FAQs, and it's really treated, even in the institutional profile, as each submission is sort of what's making it roll. So a year is falling off on the back end, and then a year is being gained on the front end. So like for the 2022 plan of work, it was for, I believe, 22 through 26, whereas the previous year was 21 through 25. So it is still rolling. And that's why I was saying is we're not requiring, a full rewrite of executive summary and those things. It's really just what you would like to communicate to NIFA in terms of for the upcoming year, how those capacity funds will be spent to address those critical issues. If there's challenges that maybe are really relevant for that particular year, something has shifted in your state that you would like to call out. It all ties together. The plan of work is describing what you plan to do. All throughout the year, projects and programs are being entered to describe what's going on to accomplish that plan you talked about. And then the annual report is that, report to say this is what we actually did in the year. And so however best, you all decide to communicate that, I think that it would help NIFA when they're reviewing those documents, and hopefully we'll see some continuity there with the NPLs being assigned to the same state if possible, so they can kind of follow that progress from year to year. Let me know if that didn't answer that question. I see, will the template be emailed out or available for download on the NIFA site? We're going to email it out to the listserv just because we wanted to be able to attach the guidance with it as well. So we wanted to put it on the site, but just in case we didn't want to have any issues and have folks not be able to find that the guidance attached to it. So we are going to email it out. Is there a reason we don't turn off closeout critical issues instead of recommending we don't do it? Well, it's for the out year. So if we don't turn it on now, there wouldn't really be another opportunity to do it for 23. So I think that, like I said, you're working in multiple years. So in terms of planning for 23, folks have reached out and said, hey, we want to manage our critical issues. We have changes we want to make in advance, planning for our 23 work. So I think that's the point, that's the goal with the closeout functionality being available. But the whole thing we're trying to do in the system is that it doesn't take effect until 23. It's just that for those projects and programs that continue over multiple years, you have to consider what may need to be reported in that annual report of accomplishments that's for 2022. I hope that's making sense. The system will have the functionality for you to address any of those projects, though, or programs that don't have a critical issue. So we're thinking about ways where we could possibly have a notification of some kind, or a way that it alerts you in the system so that it helps with that. But really there's no action to take necessarily, because in theory, they're not without a critical issue until 2023. I hope that makes sense. I know this is new, so we'll be working through it together. Could you please tell us how multi-state work is to be incorporated in the plan of work? I think you could talk about that in the executive summary. but I think it probably shows up most, or the opportunity to talk about it shows up most in those projects and programs. You can also, of course, highlight it in the annual report of accomplishments as well. I don't know if that fully answers the question. If not, please feel free to let me know. Where this earlier, states who submit jointly submit one plan of work for our state. Yes, if you report jointly, it should just be one submission for plan of work, just like in the institutional profile. Yep. I see there's a, sure, we have a request to show the template one more time. Are you able to bring that up, Joy?
Yes, I am.
All right, so yes, the template just has the 7 fields. So the first one is just where there's a drop down and you're able to choose your state or your institution. If you want to just click that arrow, Joy, yeah. So it just has a list of them there to choose from. And then in B, it's the executive summary. And then C is this merit and scientific peer review. And then all of the other cells are related to stakeholder input. We just have 4 different cells to put in information, but it's all related to stakeholder input. And in the slide deck that we'll send out, it gives a description of what each of those fields mean, but it shouldn't be anything different than what you've provided before for each of these fields. And so the main thing is it's just one row, and you'll just put text into each field, and this will help with that upload to the database later on. Any other, oh, I see a hand, let's see. Yes, is that, I'm not sure if that's Celeste with the raised hand. I might be having the wrong name, CSU Sesta.
Yeah, that was me, Alexis.
Hello.
Yeah, I had my question answered. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. I was guessing Celeste, but I was incorrect. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm hoping that that means it was clear. If not, again, please reach out to us. We're here to help. We're trying to make this smooth as it can be, and hopefully, like I said, for 24 we'll be all set in the system. But yes, please reach out to us if you think of follow-up questions, and we'll get out a recap to you. We'll get a copy of the slides to you, and we'll also send out the template along with some guidance just in case it's helpful for others who may not have been on today's call. Sorry about the video technical challenges. We'll fix that for next time. Especially sorry to Jessica, who joined and wasn't able to be on camera. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next month, and take care.
Thank you.